Humans have a love-hate relationship with change. We need it for growth and variety, and yet we hate the upheaval it brings into our lives. Resilience seems to be the answer. So let's explore a new kind of conversation where we look at the turbulence of change and the resilience that enables us to not only survive it, but to truly thrive from it. I'm Paula Shaw, life transition expert, grief counseling specialist, and author. I'll be spotlighting influential people on this podcast, people who have taken the steps to change it up. So join us as we share valuable information to help you navigate the rocky waters of change. Come on, jump on in. Welcome to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and I am really glad that you're with me today because we have something super important to talk about. We're going to be talking about teenage anxiety and depression because it's a problem on the rise. And I think that we need, as you know, we've been talking all season about grief issues of loss, issues that create all of these different manifestations of grief. And this is a huge one because many of our teenagers are in trouble. So before I get into that, I just want to say that I'm delighted to be your host. I am an author, a speaker, and a life transition coach. And my specialty is working with grief. We've talked a lot in the last season about grief having many faces. And two of those faces can be anxiety and depression. Remember, our teenagers and other people in our society, for that matter, are not suffering depression just because maybe they have some genetic predisposition to it, though that can be a factor. But usually depression is an offshoot, or shall we say, a result of some kind of loss that never got healed, some trauma that never was resolved or healed. So it's really important, I think, for all of us that we understand depression and anxiety, because so often those are two of the faces of grief that show up the most. Most of us, I think, expect the sadness and the tears and the despondency and the overwhelm and the despair. And certainly those are huge faces of grief. But sometimes when that grief isn't resolved, when that grief doesn't really get healed, rather than being able to go forward in a healthy way filled with vitality, we get stuck in that lowered energy of depression, or we become fearful about tomorrow, fearful about a month from now, fearful about the next moments, just fearful about life. And when you think about it, that's a very normal, natural result of grief, because so often grief results when something unexpected happens. Out of the blue, someone breaks up with you, or out of the blue, an accident kills someone you love. Out of the blue, you get fired from your job. And when that kind of thing can happen, the subconscious goes, oh, wow, this isn't a very safe place here on earth. We better start being a little more on guard, a little more vigilant about how we approach life, because none of us wants to go through pain again, not that kind of pain. Loss is painful no matter what, but shocking loss out of the blue can be really difficult to deal with and can cause long-term changes in our psyche, in our behavior, in our thoughts. So before I introduce my guest today, who I'm proud to say is a young 16-year-old woman who won an essay writing contest that was put on by Rotary International. And she won third place for her essay that I used for the title of this show called The Overdue Conversation. And her essay was about her own experiences and what she's seen around her in dealing with teenage anxiety and grief. So before we bring Dylan Stolba on, I'd like to share with you some of what I learned in the research that I did for this show. So I'm going to go ahead and put my eyes on so that I'm seeing accurately. So I got to tell you, a lot of this stuff blew me away. I was really surprised. So a lot of the information came from a study that was done by Blue Cross and Blue Shield. It was a major study. It was done in 2018, so it's not the most current, but the information was spot on, and excuse me, these trends have continued. So what they found in this study was major depression is the second most impactful condition on overall health for all of us. The first being high blood pressure and hypertension. In 2018, diagnoses of major depression had risen 33% from 2013. So in that period of time, the diagnoses of depression, major depression, had risen that much. 6% of those were women, 2.8% men. So we do see more depression in females. The fastest rise is in those 35 and under. So that's just really amazing. 35 and under. And the rate of diagnoses in adolescents between 12 and 17 has risen 63%. And that was in 2018. It's even higher now. And of those, 47% were boys, but 65% were girls. So also found that was very interesting, the link between depression and overall health is pretty incredible. People with depression tend to have at least one or more serious chronic health conditions. So that depression sets the physiology up to just not be as healthy and strong. And they tend to have more chronic conditions. They lose overall, because of major depression, humans lose 10 healthy years of life because of other conditions that can coexist. And they're 7 times, people with major depression are 7 times more likely to suffer from alcohol and drug addiction. And I have seen that in my practice time and time again, because when the pain becomes too much, it's just kind of like, I can't take it, so I need to ease the pain. I need to smooth the edges. And so taking a drink or using some kind of drugs is often the method people use. So let's look a little bit about what major depression actually is. So people with major depression and severe depression can incapacitate them from being able to perform normally in life. They may find it absolutely impossible to do daily chores, such as working, studying, sleeping, even eating. And those who have had at least one episode of major depression are more likely to have another. Some of the symptoms to look for, if you're wondering if your teen is suffering from major depression, this is very important to know what to look for. loss of interest in activities or relationships that used to be enjoyable, fatigue and loss of energy. Remember, depression is a lowered energy state. The vibration of the energy that makes us up is just vibrating at a lower level. So, fatigue and loss of energy would be very, very prominent. Having a hard time concentrating, that can be another really a prominent part of depression. Unexplained aches and pains, headaches, and stomach problems. See, I wouldn't have associated that necessarily with depression, but these are ways they have found that it shows up, particularly in teens. Insomnia, or the opposite, excessive sleeping. Low self esteem and feelings of worthlessness. This is a really important one, as we're going to see in just a few minutes when we talk a little bit about the impact of social media on depression among teens. A sense of despair, sadness, or hopelessness can also be one of the ways it shows up. And of course, when it gets really extreme, recurring thoughts of suicide or death. And of course, we know in the therapeutic community, and I think most parents are aware when those discussions start happening, or if your child's friend says your child talked about suicide, you need to get help immediately. Because I have to tell you, in my own practice, I have worked with teens who tried to commit suicide, but fortunately lived because somebody unexpectedly found them. And almost every one of them has said to me, I didn't really want to die. I just wanted to get out of pain. I just wanted some kind of help. So parents, don't hesitate. If any discussion of suicide becomes an issue, get your child help immediately. And then the last two signs that we want to keep our eyes open for would be significant weight loss or significant weight gain. And then finally, using alcohol or drugs to self-medicate. So if you're seeing those signs, please take action. Get your child help. So let's look at what are some of the causes of teen depression. Well, obviously loss of a loved one, a significant loss. It could be running for an office in school and losing that, losing a good friend. Suddenly your crowd decides you're not in with them anymore and you get outed. There's a word for that that's not coming to me right now. That can be a huge problem. Social isolation. Oh, wow. When your friends abandon you or reject you, that can be huge for a teen. Huge. Life changes, such as a divorce among your parent, trauma that's a result of abuse or some rape, that kind of thing that comes out of nowhere can cause incredible despair and an incredible sense of powerlessness. Excuse me, let me say that again. A sense of powerlessness. This is huge because when people feel powerless, that's when they go to this place of despair and start feeling, why go on? So here are some things that our kids today are dealing with that can be causes of depression that people in my generation, boomers, didn't have to deal with. Social media. It's a primary source of anxiety and pressure for adolescents because they become depressed when they compare their life with the people they see online, many of whom may be actually very unhappy themselves, but they're only sharing the stuff that looks good to everybody. And that happens even with adults for sure. But when they also compare their lives to the people they're following, the people that are trending on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, they feel they're nothing. They feel they have no worth. And of course, that isn't true, but it's a problem. It's a real problem today. And this is interesting to me. Scientists have found correlations between teen smartphone use and depression. That one kind of blew me away. And one of the reasons they're now saying is excessive use of technology damages relationships, education, and extracurricular activities. The kids are sitting alone with their phones. They're spending time with screens when they should be interacting with other humans, with their peers. Many teens also experience academic pressure, and today it's harder than ever to get into the college that you'd really like to go to. So there's another source of angst and depression. And let's remember, the adolescent brain is still developing. So they don't have a mature prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that controls self-regulations. So a lot of teens have poor impulse control, which can lead to substance abuse and poor sexual choices that can then lead to depression and despair. And one other one that I thought was really interesting as well is that, well, let's talk two. The teen years are usually when your first romantic experience happens. And if that doesn't go well, you're not where I am down the road, where you know a relationship cannot go well, but then something else comes along. No, when you're 15 and the person you think you're going to love for the rest of your life rejects you, that's huge. And I've had teens show up in my practice feeling like they wanted to die because so-and-so just broke up with them or is no longer interested. So parents, let's not give short shrift to our children when they are hurting and in despair because of a relationship breakup, because for them, it feels like the end of the world. And sometimes they act on that, and that can be very dangerous. And finally, what I thought was very interesting, especially as a mother, my children are no longer teens, but I do remember how many parents my age were so concerned about sparing their children from going through emotional pain, sparing them from going through any hard times. And sometimes that concern leads to us being helicopter parents and overprotecting, so they don't get to learn the skills of resilience and getting through a hard time on their own. And if they don't know in their own heart and in their own gut and soul that they can handle hard times, if they don't have some tools that help them through that, then when hard times come, they get overwhelmed and they move to despair much more quickly. So parents, we have to let them work through things. We can support them. We can let them know they're loved, but we've got to let them solve their problems. We've got to let them work things out so they know in their gut and in their soul that they can do it. And one last thing that made total sense to me, and it's been something I've harped on for years, because our kids are spending so much time on screens. And by the way, I have to share a story that a client shared with me that blew me away. Her daughter was having a sleepover. Now, what I remember about my daughter's sleepovers is giggling and chatting into all hours of the night until I finally had to go and say, "Go to sleep now." But this mother walked by her daughter's bedroom door where all the girls were hanging out, and it was silent. She heard nothing. And so she opened the door thinking, oh my goodness, those girls have snuck out. They sneaked out the window. And guess what? They were all sitting there having conversations with each other by text. Sitting in a room together, they were texting each other. And now there is something that has come up called nature deficit disorder. This is a disorder that happens when our children aren't outside enough, when they aren't breathing fresh air and spending time in nature. So parents, we've got to step in. We've got to take away those phones at least at a certain time of day. We've got to say it's time now to sit down to dinner and talk to your family. It's time now to interact with other humans. So let's make that a goal. Let's make that something that we're doing as families. Now, I want to conclude this segment with talking about some ways to help teens that are dealing with depression and anxiety. And of course, there's therapy. And there are many different kinds of therapy. EMDR, which works with trying to neutralize the energies between left and right brain, cognitive behavioral therapy, interactive personal therapy. There are many kinds of work that help. And it's important, parents, to include your children in the choice of therapist so that they feel comfortable with the person and comfortable with the modalities that person is using. But here are some other ways that are really helpful to deal with teenage depression and anxiety. Exercise. Yes. Get a load of these statistics. One, 11-year depression study of 33,908 people found 12% of the depression cases could be prevented completely with only 1 hour of exercise a week. Another study found that only 30 minutes of exercise 3 times a week was as effective as antidepressant drugs. So let's don't be running for the drugs to medicate our children, particularly, but even for ourselves. Get to the gym, take a walk, ride your bike. That can work just as well, and it's so much healthier for the body. Nutrition, diet can be a really, really powerful method for relieving teen depression. So let's investigate that, especially if they're eating a lot of sugar or a lot of carbs or things that are just kind of weighing them down and not helping them to be more active. And finally, mindfulness, mindfulness practices, meditation, learning to sit quietly in a room by yourself and shift the way you feel. I meditate every morning in my life, and I have done so since I was in my early 20s. And it's made a major difference for me in how I feel each day and how I cope with my life. So before we go to break, I want to just give you the symptoms to look for if the problem is just anxiety, nervousness and agitation, sweating, nausea and dizziness, increased heart rate, difficulty concentrating, irritability and anger, and sleep disturbances. So again, if you're seeing those kinds of symptoms in your child or in your friend, if you're a teenager listening to this show, please let their parents know. Do what you can to get help, because that is really important. A connection that feels like a safe place and a place where you're comfortable learning new ways of coping. Because what helps us most when we're in the midst of the helplessness we feel with depression and anxiety is having tools. Having some tools we can use to help us shift. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I will be introducing you to Dylan Stolba, a young lady who has lived through this whole thing herself and has turned into an amazing writer and a really wonderful person. I can't wait to introduce you to Dylan. We'll be back after this break.
Is living in today's fast-paced world making you feel stressed and out of balance? Are anxiety, sleeplessness, depression, lack of focus, or weight gain robbing you of your relationship and your energy? If you're ready for change, you need to call Paula Shaw. Paula helps you identify and eliminate self-sabotaging thinking and behavior. Using a wide variety of mind-body techniques, she provides her clients with the most effective processes for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. We're talking about teen depression and anxiety today. And in the first segment, I gave you a lot of information about what it looks like, what to watch out for, and what to do, what we can do to help our teens when they get into depression and anxiety. And one thing I want to add to what I already shared is don't just say, oh, she's just going through a little sadness, oh, she'll be fine. Oh, I'll take her shopping. Oh, he's just going through a little bit of angst about the football team or about whatever sport he's in. Let's don't trivialize our kids when they're in pain. Even if you take them to the therapist and the therapist says, I think they're doing okay. It's better to know that than to think there's nothing to worry about and then wake up one day and the problem has grown. And another thing that's really important, parents, be open with your teens about your own psychological and mental experiences. If you've ever had depression, or if you ever had prolonged sadness, or if you exercise every day because you can be prone to feeling sad or depressed if you don't, share that. It helps your kids understand what to do, and it also helps them not feel so isolated, like something is wrong with them, like they are defective. It's just good to know as human beings, we're not the only ones, no matter what the situation is. All right, now I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Dylan Stolba. She is going into the 10th grade at Carlsbad High School. And as I mentioned earlier, she entered a writing contest sponsored by Rotary International, and she won 3rd place for her essay on teenage depression and anxiety entitled The Overdue Conversation. So please help me welcome this lovely, amazing teenager, Dylan Stolba. Hey, Dylan.
Hi.
Good to see you, dear. And I forgot to tell our audience that I first met you when you, and you are 16, correct?
I'm actually 15, but yeah.
15. Oh my goodness. See, and I would have guessed you were even older than that when I first heard you speak. This young lady stood up in front of a group of, I think it was like 400 people or something, and she told them about this paper she'd written, and I believe you read it, correct, Dylan?
Yeah, I read it.
And I was amazed both by the content and the wisdom and her poise. So I walked right up to her and said, I would really like to have you on my podcast. And she was gracious enough to agree to do so. So Dylan, I think it's important for people to hear the perspective of the teen, the person who actually experienced this. So could you share with us, did you write this paper because you yourself had experienced depression and anxiety?
Yeah, so it was actually a speech that my speech and debate teacher gave to us as a final. So I really had full freedom with the topic, and I knew that I was really passionate about this because, I've gone through it, and I talk about like personal experience throughout the essay, and it was honestly really easy for me to write just because I felt like I could relate to it so much.
Mm-hmm. How did it show up for you? What did you experience?
I go to a public high school. It's really a lot of just things that a lot of other teenagers go through, friend breakups, um, friend problems, period. There can be family problems, a lot of stuff with school, pushing yourself. It gives you, it's only so good until you end up, losing all of your focus. So a lot of stuff with anxiety, and I have been depressed before, and so it felt comfortable for me to write this.
So I think I remember reading in the essay and hearing you talk about this at the Rotary meeting. There were days when you couldn't even push yourself to brush your teeth or take a shower.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what it was, there have been days where it's been really hard to get myself to even get out of bed, and going through it multiple times, I feel like each time I learn that it's not just me, there's more people who are like that. And when you're in bed for however long, you might feel alone, but I feel like the reason I wrote this was just because teenagers like me, like my friends, like anyone else, can end up this way, and it's like some of the most unexpected people you think.
Absolutely. So when you felt that way, what did you do? Was there any action that you took that you found helpful?
Um, in the moment, I think it really was just having the mindset that even though I feel like this right now, it will get better
Mhm.
as long as I do push myself. And some of those days I didn't push myself. I didn't get any work done. I showed up to class the next day without everything prepared that I needed, and it's definitely a journey for yourself, I feel
Mhm.
like.
In the adult community, who did you find that you could talk to, or who understood and who didn't?
Um, I am really grateful that my parents have both been just supportive. They weren't, they're great to me, but I don't think that they really knew anything was going on per se. But
Mhm.
um, you know, there's a few teachers that maybe they don't necessarily catch on, oh, she's depressed or has so
Mhm.
much anxiety, but is having a bad day.
Yeah.
So, um, my I have a good support system, which I think is really a blessing for me to be able to get through things like this. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's huge. Support system. Community is really one of the most powerful ways we can heal anything. If we have those safe people, but I really emphasize the word safe because sometimes we open our hearts and we talk to the wrong person. And then that person shares that story that you didn't want shared. Have you ever seen that happen? Have you had it happen to yourself or any of your friends?
Definitely. I've definitely been in that position before, especially with other people my age. Kids talk, kids
Mhm.
get the word around if they hear something that could be interesting to the next person, then, it's up for grabs.
And the sad thing is they probably aren't even really cognizant of the fact that they could be exacerbating the problem. And sometimes that pushes a kid over the edge and they attempt suicide or they do something to harm themselves.
Yeah, that could definitely lead to, yeah, definitely could be true.
One of the things I didn't talk about in that first segment that I've seen as a real problem and a manifestation of depression and anxiety is cutting. Have you experienced kids who are cutting as a way of coping?
Yeah, I've definitely had friends and just peers who I know who have been through that.
Mhm.
And it's definitely a sensitive topic to bring up or even to be told.
Yes.
So it's it's definitely one to look out for and one to go about the right way, you know? It's
Mhm.
hard to just dive right into it.
Absolutely. And, I think for the parents who are listening, should you find out your child is cutting, or if you already are aware of that, it is a serious situation. And I have been told by kids who were cutters, for some of them, they did it as a way to punish themselves because they wanted to inflict pain because they didn't feel good about themselves for some reason or another. And then others almost felt like it was a release of that bad energy within them. But, every kid who's cutting may have a slightly different reason for doing it. But what I really want to stress, and I want to share a story from my own practice. I had a 15-year-old who was brought to me during the pandemic. And Dylan, I really want to talk to you about your pandemic experiences too. Of course, all the kids were just depressed and getting sick and tired of going to school from their bedroom. But then when the word came that it was time to go back on campus, this anxiety about going back on campus, competing again, being with your peers, suddenly that depression of hanging out in your bedroom became anxiety about going back into competition at school. And this young woman tried to cut her face right here with scissors at the mouth. For those of you that are only listening, it was cutting from the corners of her mouth into her face. Fortunately, she did not succeed, but there were definite lines there. She did not break the skin, but her mother, very wisely, her mother and father, saw that as a huge wake up call and brought her to me immediately. And what I want you to know, parents, is that in doing the therapy and helping this child to see that all of the fear she was experiencing really lived within her, and that she had everything she needed to actually go back out there and re-enter school. This young woman today has a scholarship to Berkeley and is starting college next year and doing great. So don't go into despair, moms and dads. Just get the kid where they can get some help. So, Dylan, have you seen anybody in either that you knew or that you heard of who was in kind of a really bad place, who got help and it turned things around?
Yeah, like I said, there have been friends who I have seen go through mental struggles harder
Mhm,
than I have.
mhm.
And some of them necessarily I'm not in so much contact with anymore, but you see that they're happier. You can tell that
Yes,
they're thriving so much more. And um, I'm not exactly sure a few of them if they got help or not, but they were able to get themselves back out of that place
yeah.
because something happened, something switched, but
Mhm.
it's a miracle. It's really beautiful.
It really is beautiful. And I think what happens sometimes, particularly at your age, suddenly they'll go out for a sports team. And I was saying in the first segment, exercise can change everything, or they change their diet, or they're just getting out into nature more and being more active. And whether the parents urge that change, or whether they just get some insight, or whether among a peer group everybody goes, hey, let's do this, let's stop doing that. Change can be an absolute huge turning point for creating health again, creating a healthier self. What helped you so much, Dylan? You just seem to be thriving now and you're so amazing.
Um, Definitely, like, I am someone who really values, like, the few friendships that I've grown.
Hmm.
But I'm also someone who has lost a lot of friends through COVID, especially, like you said, a lot of kids go through that depression. I turned from an extrovert, would talk to whoever, wanted to try this friend group and this friend group and floated around, to a complete introvert. I felt like anytime I had an interaction with even my parents, who I talked to every day, I would have to go back into my room and basically like recharge. Like, it was really bad. And I think, I went through this through middle school, which I'm happy to, I feel like that was a pretty good time for me to go through it, just because I was able to get back into the groove for high school.
Yeah.
But going through those last year and a half, getting back into middle school was hard. And I could tell it wasn't just hard on me. I've had this conversation with a few friends where they're like, yeah, I turned very not sheltered, just introverted as well.
Yes.
And I think it's a weird thing to go through, because back to now, I feel like, oh, I can go to this friend group back to how I was before COVID. But it's just a crazy process that I think all of us ended up in a different mental state than we were.
Yeah. And, I don't think any of well, of course, who of us could have prepared, right? None of us knew the pandemic was coming. And certainly depression increased among adults as well. Anxiety certainly rose among adults. It was an unparalleled experience in our lifetimes, even those of us down the road a bit. We'd never had that happen. So no one could have predicted how it was going to affect us. And I think what really was surprising to me is how impactful it was on teens, because it's a time of your life. I mean, we all enjoy our colleagues and our peers and all of that. But when you're an adult, you're usually more focused on whatever your work is. It's not such a social experience as high school is. And so to lose the social part of high school and only have it really be the educational part, I think was this huge blow for the kids that none of us foresaw.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reason that a lot of people my age, have the energy to get up and go to school is because they know that they're going to have those few friends there that are going to get them through the day.
Exactly.
It's hard to just pay attention to 2-hour classes when that might not be your favorite thing.
Absolutely. Or in my day, you were excited about the drama club meeting that day, or the football game on Friday, or, there was a lot of that stuff that made school not only a place where you learn, but it made it fun. And of course, the most important part being the friend group that you had, and those social interactions that were not happening online. They were happening between people standing together and talking to each other. So it was very different back then. But again, I think that you make such a great point that we got to have more than just going to get educated to inspire us to feel good about getting up early, which most teens don't do naturally, getting up early and having to get to the campus and attend class. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break, Dylan, and we'll be right back to finish our discussion on teen anxiety and depression. We'll be right back. Paula Shaw here. I'm thrilled that LifeWave phototherapy patches, which use no drugs or chemicals, have become a part of my life and my business. My family and I all use their wearable patch technology, and the results are life-changing. My parents in their 90s used the X39 patch, which activates stem cells, reverses aging, and improves the function of every area of the brain. I love X39 because I can work out with the 30-year-olds with no problem. And it's erased my fine lines and given my skin a youthful glow. LifeWave patches use a patented form of phototherapy, frequencies of light, to safely boost health and wellness at the cellular level. No drugs. To learn more, go to my website, lifewave.com/safe health. That's lifewave.com/safe health. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is Dylan Stolba, who won third place in an essay contest put on by Rotary International for the essay she wrote on teenage anxiety and depression that had such a fabulous title. I used the same title for our show today, called The Overdue Conversation. And Dylan, let me ask you, while we're talking about that amazing title, what made you decide to call your essay The Overdue Conversation?
Well, I chose the title last, so I had written up everything, and the overall idea I wanted to get through was that, the teens with this, they feel either alone, or if they don't feel alone, they feel embarrassed. And I feel like the ultimate conclusion that I came to in the essay was because we kind of shelter this kind of conversation and we don't always feel so open and honest to exploit the struggles that we have been going through, even if they do help one another. So I thought the overdue conversation really fit because it really is a conversation needed to be had that we haven't seen too much in the world yet.
Absolutely. And I think maybe that's one of the good offshoots of the pandemic, that more and more now you're hearing commercials for BetterHelp, online therapy. You're hearing people talk more openly about their own issues with depression or anxiety. You're hearing interviews with celebrities talking about these experiences in their own lives. And I think that's huge because you're right. There's been a lot of shame around these issues for years. And what I can tell you is when you're worried that people won't love you or will find you defective if you're not operating normally, whatever that is, then you push it down, you bury it, you put on the I'm fine face, and that never helps anything. I'm sure, Dylan, you've seen a lot of kids walking around with the I'm fine face on when they're really not fine at all.
Yeah, like I said, it can be in some of the most unexpected people. I don't know how many people on my campus even know that I have struggled or will struggle too. But I think that it's just important to have the conversation, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it was such a brave choice that you decided to create your paper on this topic. But as you pointed out, it's so needed, so needed. And in your own experience, Dylan, what helped you the most? Or do you feel like, are you still experiencing any anxiety or depression now? Is it occasional? Is it completely gone? And what did you find worked best for you?
I don't think that I could say that it's completely gone. I think sometimes I fall into this kind of state where maybe something will happen, like a personal experience very recently, actually. Back in February, my grandfather passed away, and it was hard on me to the point where I definitely let my grades slip, and I definitely had not much motivation. And it was good that I could recognize it as depression, but it just made it so that I knew when I was out of it that it was a growing experience. But
Yes.
those weeks where I couldn't get out of bed, like I said, I couldn't do much, definitely let my grades slip there. They were definitely hard, and that was one of the occasions where something happened that caused it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's just nothing big happens, but you just feel in a state where,
Right.
maybe you're not at the best point with friends. They don't
Mhm.
hate you or anything, but
Yeah,
you just see everyone else and they're so happy or they look happy,
I look happy.
and you just get in your head about it too.
There's a line that I've been saying for years that I'm going to say right now because it's so applicable. But one of the hardest things for humans is that we're always comparing our insides to everybody else's outsides. And that's one of the problems with social media and teens. You may not be feeling so good about yourself. You may be feeling like, oh, I don't matter, or oh, I'm so bad at this, or I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not any good at sports. You may be feeling all that, and then you're looking at pictures of everybody else excelling and looking beautiful, or none of us ever takes a picture when we're looking our worst. So you go on social media, of course everyone looks happy and the pictures are great because that's the stuff we chose to post. But we need to remember that's not our whole life picture. That's not our whole life experience. But I think it's hard, especially when you're leaning in toward a depressive state. It's hard not to look at that and think, wow, that's not me. I don't have that. I don't look like that. And so I think it's really important that we always remember as humans to do what Dylan has so wisely pointed out in her paper. She's saying, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the realities of what we're feeling. Let's share not only all the cool stuff that happens to us, but the pain and times when we hurt, because that helps other people in pain and who are hurting not feel alone. And I think, Dylan, one of the things I heard you say is the worst thing is feeling alone. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole point why I wrote the essay in the first place, because um, I think that the only thing that shows me I'm not alone is when other people end up opening up. And it's been a huge eye-opener to just see the people around me who I thought, like you said, on the outside were so great and, had this wonderful life and never felt the way that I do, actually end up with these feelings as well. Um, and I think it's made it a lot more comfortable for me to write things like this, to know that,
Mhm.
there are people out there who will judge you for having these kind of things. Like I said in my essay, I can read it. Um, there's no country, society, or culture where people with mental illness have the same societal value as people without mental illness, is a line that I put in there.
Yes.
Um, but it was definitely an eye opener, I think, but for the better, for the better.
Mm. Well, Dylan, I don't think I can add much to the wisdom that you have just shared. I do have one more question. Was it part of what helped you in your own healing that these other people opened up to you and then you didn't feel so alone in your own pain?
Definitely. I think that I'm a person that is not going to, let everyone know everything that I'm feeling all the time. It's
Right.
definitely either one-on-one or in a group of friends that I feel I trust or I feel comfortable with.
Uh-huh.
So I think when other people open up to me or we start a conversation that will get deeper, it's a lot easier for me to feel comfortable to share this kind of conversation. And I think because of this conversation needed to be had so much, that it's just important to have those and to be able to share.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, is there such a thing as like a group therapy kind of thing, or a group at school on campus that talks about these kinds of issues, maybe with a school counselor?
The counselor's always an option. I've definitely gone to the counselor before. There's also, at my school, Carlsbad, we have this thing called PALS, which I've gone to as well. It's where like the seniors, I believe it's just seniors, are in the office and they have like a specific period or specific time where, you know, anyone can text them or say, hey, I need to go to the PALS office, so that you don't necessarily have to talk to an adult if you don't feel comfortable, but you talk to someone closer to your age and someone who just is there because they want to help you, who
Oh,
is still
great.
attending the high school that you go to. It's a really cool option. Actually, I go to this one girl the few times that I have gone, and it's just really nice. Like it's something that I never put myself in. Like I never saw myself going to a counselor or going to the office per se, to seek help in any way, but sometimes it's just there, and it's a perfect outlet for me to even vent if I don't even want help per se. It's just easy to get it out.
And that's called PALS?
Yeah, PALS.
I love that. I love what a great program. And may I say, Dylan, though you've been incredibly strong and you seem to have found your way to, you know, a healthy place where you can function well, some kids need to go see a therapist or spend time with that school counselor. And would you join me, Dylan, in urging kids to get whatever kind of help they need and not be worried about what other people might say?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I've had friends who love therapy. Like they recommend it to absolutely everyone. I haven't myself tried going to therapy.
Oh, I think your computer froze. And she was saying so many wonderful things. I don't know if we're going to be able to get her back, everybody. But I want to say to you, Dylan, should you ever need a therapy session, it would be my gift to offer you one as a thank you for the amazing wisdom and all the great insight you have shared with us today. And are you back, Dylan?
Yeah, I'm back. My internet just cut out.
Okay. And I was just saying while you were gone that should you ever reach a place where you decide you want to try a therapy session, you come and see me. It'll be my gift to you. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers. This is an important topic, everybody. So please share what you learned today. Share this show and talk to people and talk to your kids if anything you've heard today has given you some insight about what they're going through. So thanks for being with us. Bless you, Dylan. You are amazing. And we'll see you all next week on Change It Up Radio. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on Change It Up Radio. I hope you found this episode informative and entertaining. If you want to hear past shows or you want to get information on being a guest or a sponsor of this show, go to changeitupradio.com. We all know that change is inevitable and it's necessary, but darn it, it's also tricky. My goal is to help you make the experience of change smoother and more productive. If you've benefited from this show, please subscribe to it, share it, and review it. That helps me to tune into what you really want to hear and what you really want to learn more about. Remember, you can find us on every major podcast platform and also on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. We look forward to seeing you next week for Change It Up Radio.